Hi, I'm Xander Simmons. You're listening to Synchrony, a narrative podcast that takes you deep into the minds of its central characters using music and sound design. I don't know about you, but an alarming number of people I come across have a vague belief in fate. We console ourselves that our misfortunes happen for a reason, and the goals we don't attain were never meant to be. We look back on our lives and connect up the dots with wobbly lines of cause and effect in an effort to make sense of everything. And the myriad stories we consume confirm our illusions of narrative coherence. This story is different, however. It's told from 3 different perspectives. That's 3 different sets of values, desires, and beliefs. Maybe you'll want to decide on which one you think sounds the most truthful. Just don't come looking to me for any of the answers.
A bunch of us read that novel, Dice Man, back in college. We even tried it out a bit, giving up our night to a roll of the dice. Usually it would just be a list of different ways we could persecute the freshmen. We grew tired of it soon enough. But I would still pull out a die every now and again. I was different back then. Shy, hesitant, paralyzed by indecision.
She came in over the top, humming this melody that was basically just one note, repeated one note, over and over like a chant. It sounded familiar. But then again, it was so simple. It could have been so simple. It could have been anything. Eventually, Michael broke into a symphony. Michael broke into a symphony.
Other iOS
I guess I'm repeating their simple phrase. I noticed that the hum was ever more assertive.
Oh, yeah?
It's rare that someone doesn't ask about the scar.
It was only when his face caught the light that I saw the scar.
I mean, it's hard to miss.
The scar had grown up with him, establishing its branches in the folds of his skin and growing its roots down into the fabric of his personality.
When I was a teen, I used to play around, telling different stories about it.
It was an intricately layered tattoo that he wore fearlessly, as if he'd designed it himself.
Now I stick to the one about being a helicopter.
It ran down the whole right side of his face and neck, the impression left by a pot of boiling water that had fallen on top of him as a child.
Oh, yeah?
And that scar down his face, it pulled you in. It was like going to reach out of his face and start growing over you.
Gross.
The scar had grown up with him.
How did he get it?
Establishing its branches in the folds of his skin.
Oh, yeah?
And growing its roots down into the fabric of his personality.
When I was a teen, I used to play around, telling different stories about it.
It was an intricately layered tattoo that he wore fearlessly,
pulled you in. It was like
as if he'd designed it himself.
Now I stick to the one about being a helicopter. That's what I'll tell him tonight anyway. I don't want to kill the vibe.
Sounds like an interesting character.
Yeah, you could say that. You know, Eli was being shy as usual, and I had to do most of the talking. I wasn't even sure how I felt about this guy. And there was something weird about him. But Eli seemed happy to meet someone to talk about psychedelics with.
Apparently it's like
Anyway, I had to get the ball rolling, didn't I? So I started telling him about our DMT trip.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, well, of course this guy had already done it. And he had this kind of blasé, been there, done that kind of attitude, you know?
Doesn't sound like much of the DMT experiences I've had.
Nothing I said seemed to impress him all that much.
I liked him instantly. We stood together outside the pub. Smoking the rest of my French cigarette. Smoking the last of the light that sucked from the sky.
They're both nervous. He seems to deal with it by going quiet. She's the opposite. She deals with it by talking and talking.
Yeah, the first time I did DMT, I saw all the big mistakes I'd made in the past and how this was making me feel in my life right now, in the present.
Jen
you know
clearly
how those
liked him
memories
too.
were weighing me down.
And soon she had taken over the conversation, as she tended to do, telling him all about our DMT trip from a few days ago. Of course, the guy had done DMT and ayahuasca before, and he had his own theories about it.
When you break through, that's the same thing as dying, basically. You have to keep holding your breath until you're no longer conscious that you're breathing. Your body will keep breathing, and it's hard to let go and trust that it will, but it will.
I've never gone that far. There's always something holding me back. It's the fear, I guess, the fear of dying.
It's your ego. That's what dies. You never die. I mean, you in the cosmic sense. That's what the DMT shows you. That you're part of this huge energy system that has its own laws, far beyond your trivial little self who thinks he knows what's up, thinks his blinkered choices actually make a difference.
Did you see the entities? The aliens, or whatever.
For me, the whole thing was a fucking entity. A majestic intelligence that can't be described by mere words. It's way beyond language, man.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, the first time I took DMT, I actually felt kind of awful. Like this huge oppressive force was bearing down on me. And I saw these pivotal times in my life when I was too scared to grab an opportunity, one after another, stacking up on top of each other like these wooden crates that felt like they were gonna fall on me and crush me. It was weirdly tangible like that.
Huh. Sounds like you didn't ascend to the astral plane.
Astral plane. I'm not sure I believe in that.
It's not a question of believing in it, Jen. You just see it, you know? Firsthand, like you feel it running all through you. Right, Michael?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, whatever. This was actually a super important experience for me, guys. It's like it was telling me, stop making these bad memories. Stop acting from fear. The more bad decisions you make, the more they're gonna weigh on you, right?
Huh. Doesn't sound like much of the DMT experiences I've had. I mean, maybe after the fact, but even then it's hard to...
And nothing I said seemed to impress him all that much. Maybe he thought it was attractive to be all cool and detached or whatever. The annoying thing was that it actually kind of was.
Does kind of sound like your type there, Jen.
I guess. And that scar down his face. It pulled you in. It was like gonna reach out of his face and start growing over yours.
Down into the
Gross.
of his personality.
No, I mean, there was actually something attractive about it. He fully owned it, if you get what I mean. And like it morphed with what he was saying or how he was feeling. It was like
It was
a part of him, but that it had a life of its own, like a symbiotic relationship or something.
You sure this wasn't just the after effects of DMT, Jen?
I can't even imagine what that thing would have looked like on psychedelics, Em.
How did he get it?
Well, obviously I asked him about it, didn't I? Turns out he got it when he was a little kid. He was pretending to be a helicopter or something, flailing his arms around like crazy in the kitchen, and someone, his mom and dad never told him who, had left a pot of boiling water teetering on the edge of a counter. A full pot of boiling water. You can imagine the rest.
Oof. Ouch.
I don't want to kill the vibe. They're both nervous.
Jen and I had been open from the start.
He seems to deal with it by going quiet.
It was something we both wanted to explore, and
Eli was being shy as usual.
by now I was
had to
used
do
to
most
her
of the talking.
flirting with other guys.
I can tell he doesn't like it, but there's something
But this time,
soft about him.
this guy,
Moldable, if you like.
he had that enticing blend of
There was something weird
confidence
about him.
and gentleness that you don't often see, and that
And I wasn't even sure how I felt.
always
about
wanted to embody
this
myself.
guy.
He just needs to relax a little.
Perhaps that's why I saw him as a threat. As if he represented a better version of me that I could never become, and others would always prefer.
But there's something Soft to bottom.
But the weird thing
Soft to bottom.
was that as much as I was resenting her for being attracted to him, I found myself being drawn towards him too.
Soft to bottom.
As if I was swimming against a current that I
Soft to bottom.
really just wanted to be carried by.
Moldable, if you like.
Does kind of sound like your type.
Yeah, well, anyway, once I told the DMT story, you know, the lake and the mountains and the mandalas and the infinite beauty of it all, the togetherness, the renewal, the disappointment at not seeing the aliens or whatever. After that, Eli started to get more talkative, and then him and this guy, Michael, started comparing notes on a whole bunch of psychedelics, and it started to get a bit tedious after a while, to be honest.
You know, they've done studies with heroin addicts, right?
Yeah. Apparently it's like a 90% recovery rate or something insane.
Did you see that TED Talk? The dude was smoking weed all day long until one day he takes ayahuasca and he sees this spirit, who they call Mother Ayahuasca, and she just straight up tells him to stop smoking so much fucking weed.
Yeah, I saw that. What was it he said? He said, Mother Ayahuasca gave me such a kicking.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what I was saying, though. It's because it shows you to yourself, like, from the outside. Those drug addicts could see themselves for what they were. And then, like, choose to do something else. Like, actively choose, probably for the first time in their whole lives.
The coin simplified matters quite a lot. No point cooking up more than you can eat, is there? Just one toss to tell you yes or no. Heads for yes, tails for no. Why? Because life doesn't offer you anything better. Don't pretend you have a real choice. To have a choice, you have to have a chooser. And all you are is a messy bundle of all the random situations you've ever gone through, with a voice narrating over the top, pretending to make sense of it all. And if you make the wrong decision, that voice is going to give you hell. So I replaced the voice with the coin, and now I've got some real peace and quiet up here. My mind is the open ocean, and I let the wind take me, but I don't let it carry me off into oblivion. I know how to sail.
She came in over the top, humming this melody that was basically just repeated one note over and over like a chant. It sounded familiar. But then again, it was so simple. Then again, it was so simple. It could have been anything. Eventually. Like Loki twist eventually. But Mother Ayahuasca gave me such
I mean, Eli and you were open, though, right?
Jen and I had been open from the start.
They look like one of those couples that have at least talked about being in an open relationship.
It was something we both wanted to explore, and by now I was used to her flirting with other guys.
I mean, Eli and you were open, though, right?
I mean, we discussed it, but neither of us had acted on it yet, and I was pretty sure he wasn't really into the idea of a threesome with another guy.
Yeah, I can't really imagine Eli with another guy.
I know, right? But there was this vibe opening up, and it was cool to meet someone new. Eli and I had pretty much been stuck with each other for the past few days, and it was refreshing to come out of our little bubble.
Yeah, okay, so you ended up sleeping with him, or what?
Just as we were getting ready to leave the bar, Jen invited him back to our camp.
Yeah, okay, so you ended up sleeping with him, or what?
Listen, the guy practically invited himself back to our tent. It was starting to get dark, and I'd assumed that we'd just leave this guy at the pub or whoever he came with.
Just as we were getting ready to leave the bar.
Actually, now that I think about it, I'm not sure he came with anyone.
Invited him back to our
Anyway, I'd assumed we'd head back to our tent, just the two of us. But he seemed to have other ideas, and before long, we were walking those dark country lanes using flashlights on our phones to guide us. Michael kept trying to get us to turn off the lights and just use our senses, but I wasn't into that idea. I'm actually kind of scared of the dark anyway.
And after a short walk, spouting arcane philosophy,
He seems lost in the search for meaning.
we were back in the tiny dome of our two-man tent.
I keep saying, why does it have to mean something?
The atmosphere was pretty tense, and we just sat there in silence, sipping this little whiskey bottle that Eli always keeps on hand.
I dug out the small whiskey bottle, passed it around.
The tent was too small, even for Eli and me, but our knees were touching as we sat there.
It's small in here. That's good. We're already touching. No need to artificially bridge the gap.
There were a few moments of silence as we sat and drank in the new intimacy.
No one is speaking. That's also good.
I was feeling this strange mix of emotions.
I found myself in a tangle of anxious thoughts as the lengthening silence tugged at the taut strings of my insecurity.
Overthinking gets you nowhere. Thinking in general is overrated.
I was both excited and put off by this guy.
I mean, Eli and you were open, though, right?
And I was a bit nervous about where this is going to be headed.
I wanted to find a way back into the lofty discussions we had been enjoying earlier, but
I wanted to get off the topic of psychedelics and consciousness and the cosmos and all that shit we've been talking about for the last hour. But every topic I came up with seemed trivial and not worth saying, basically.
every opening that came to my mind seemed forced and lame, and I stayed quiet.
And then out of nowhere, he took this shiny little coin out of his pocket and tossed it in the air. Twice. I looked over at Eli, but his eyes were still fixed on the ground. It's like he didn't even notice.
What's going to happen to these two tonight?
Then, something weird happened.
They seem happy to let me decide. The thing is, I don't decide.
Michael took what looked like a quarter out of his pocket and rubbed it between his fingers.
The coin decides. A head for a head. Two heads for two heads. Simple as that.
Then he tossed it twice without saying a word and put it back in his pocket. I don't think Jen even really
I
noticed.
can't say I don't hope for a happy ending sometimes. But don't we all?
They were now sharing eye contact, beaming at each other from across the dim light of the electric lantern.
And Eli had completely withdrawn into
I
himself.
turned my eyes towards the ground, closed them,
He was just staring at the floor.
tried to focus on my
I
breathing.
felt like he wanted to leave, and his body fidgeted every now and then like he was going to get up.
My body tightened.
But I didn't want him to leave me alone with this guy.
I felt like I should just leave them to it.
Overthinking gets you nowhere. It's better just to listen and get into the groove.
I turned my eyes towards the ground, closed them, tried to focus on my breathing,
The groove is
on the
everywhere.
cicada's ambient pulse.
Wind, water, birds, insects.
I could hear the stirring of limbs reaching out to caress, the slight quickening of breath.
Just gotta listen. Feel it.
I felt like I should just leave them to it.
Michael seemed happy just sitting there in silence.
Just gotta listen. Feel it.
He was looking at me, and I could feel his eyes on me as I looked at Eli.
But as I readied myself to stand up and exit the tent, I heard a low, resonant hum wash over the soundscape.
And that's when he started singing.
Singing?
Yeah, well, more of a hum at first. It was this descending melody that he kept repeating over and over.
Weird.
Yeah, but it had this strange effect on me. I could feel myself relaxing. Every time it descended, it was like when you get a massage, like someone's pushing the tension out of your back and neck. As I got into it, this melody popped into my head. I think it was from when I was traveling in India, like from one of the bhajans we used to sing at the ashram. It's super simple, and I felt like it would just sit right on top of what he was doing.
Don't tell me you started singing too.
She came in over the top.
It's like I couldn't help myself. It just
Humming
came
this
out of
melody
me.
that was basically just one note, repeated over and over like a chant.
At that point, I was just getting lost in the music. It's like I started floating away in my anxieties about how he was going to react. I didn't care anymore. There was just this music.
They kept on repeating their simple phrases ever more assertively. And as I listened, I noticed that the harmony was plausible, but somehow unconvincing, weak, incomplete. She had done this deliberately. I knew. Opening up the space. But why see it as a trap?
And then, you know what? He started joining in too.
So, you want to know the real story? To be honest, I've told so many different versions by now, it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But let's just say it wasn't an accident. But is there really such a thing as an accident? Dad let me choose. Me. It was up to me. And of course, I chose tails. He tossed the coin in the air and fumbled it. It landed in his beer. He cursed and smashed the glass on the floor. The foamy liquid parted to reveal the shiny quarter on the kitchen tiles. Heads. It still counts, he said. A head for a head. And he laughed. And I closed my eyes. Back then we had one of those old-timey kettles you heat up on the stove. I heard its feverish whistle fill up the darkness.
Synchrony is written, composed, and produced by Xander Simmons, mixed by Scholes, and mastered by Hébert. This episode stars Dylan Burns as Michael, Rivergard as Eli, Marissa Blair as Jen, and Jess Abrams as M. It also features 3 talented singers, Kate Markle, Kerry Bursey, and William Crashaw. This podcast is made possible with support from the Canada Council for the Arts. Please do take the time to like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you heard. It goes a long way. Tune in next week for a completely fresh soundscape to immerse yourself in.